Hey everyone, welcome back to Harry Potter Folklore. So, for today's video we are going to discuss every single piece of magic Voldemort has ever created. Well, at least that we know of anyway. I've got a pretty good list, I think. I went through most chapters he was featured in throughout the books, researched all his spells, abilities, and I hope you're all going to be satisfied with what I've got for you all today. This video took 4 full days just to research alone, so if it swings your way then please hit that like button, as it would help me get that algorithm back in my corner. Let's jump straight in with the first item on the list, the curse on the Gaunt family ring. The curse placed on the Gaunt signet ring was an absolutely devastating piece of dark magic and is what I'd consider another version of the killing curse, but only at a slower rate, because once the victim in question was exposed to it, then it was certain death. I think what Voldemort enjoyed most about this curse was the fact that he didn't even need to be present for it to do his work, and he knew that it was lights out for anyone that it came in contact with. It's important to remember that it was the ring itself, the band, and not the stone that was a Horcrux, which goes to show the power of the resurrection stone itself, rejecting the dark magic. The curse would act like a poison, travelling throughout the person's body, withering the flesh from head to toe as they scream in agony. Albus Dumbledore was the first casualty of this curse, and only for his own brilliance in the moment was momentarily able to subdue its effects until he got back to Hogwarts Castle and received further help from Severus Snape, who was able to keep the curse at bay. However, this was a temporary fix, and Dumbledore had to quickly accept that he was going to die eventually. A curse like this has never been seen before, and it makes me wonder what kind of dark magic Voldemort was able to pour into this spell's creation. Obviously, he cursed the ring to protect his Horcrux, but it was a combination of the Horcrux's defensive magic and Voldemort's own creation too. Either way, it's quite underrated and almost a forgotten piece of dark magic. Next up, we're going to look at Voldemort's ability to fly without a broom. Lord Voldemort was the only known wizard who had the ability to fly without a broom. This isn't to be confused with apparition, which the wizard had to choose their destination before casting the charm. I think it's one of the things that the movies didn't really do well, if I'm honest. Voldemort's flight looked really similar to Bellatrix apparating, but anyway, the Dark Lord was able to fly at any point, wherever he wanted, whenever he wanted, and he could even levitate himself if he chose to do so. But the question is, how did he do it? Well, it's not explained, but I have a pretty good idea that I think can explain it all. Voldemort acquired the Locket of Salazar Slytherin before it was a Horcrux. Now, he got this when he met with and killed Hepzibah Smith, who also held the Hufflepuff Cup. The Locket of Slytherin was made from the gem-like horn from the Horned Serpent. This was believed to allow the Horned Serpent to fly, so with the power of the horn infused into the Locket of Slytherin, the Dark Lord could harness that power and reverse engineer its properties and therefore apply it to his own abilities. Magic may be different in terms of power and effectiveness, but magic is magic, and I believe it's all created from a source point and just expanded upon and taken in different directions. Being able to fly without a broom is a massive achievement and something that Voldemort is rightly credited for. Next up, we're going to talk about his expansion of the Horcrux. Now guys, I'm well aware that Voldemort didn't create the first Horcrux. It was made long ago by a dark wizard from ancient Greece known as Herbo the Foul. However, it is believed that he and anyone after him only created one Horcrux. That was all that was required in order to achieve immortality, but in saying that, none of those who created a Horcrux before Voldemort are around today, are they? So, it could be that the items they chose to store their soul inside either weren't so durable, in addition to not having any defensive mechanisms placed upon them either. Voldemort took the Horcrux and completely revolutionized it. For starters, he made more than one. He wanted 7 pieces of his soul, including the one in his body, to co-align with the number 7, of which was believed to have huge magical significance and would therefore offer him a balance within the properties of magic itself. He chose objects of significance and importance, all of which were very well made. He then placed deadly defensive protective charms on them that would have life-threatening, I'd say life-ending repercussions for anyone who tried to operate them. He also hid them in places that he believed nobody would find them. As I said, I know Voldemort didn't create the Horcrux, but he made that dark ritual his own. I mean, the wheel was already invented before it was applied to the motor car. if that's in any way a justifiable comparison. So let's talk about the Emerald Potion. Well, this is something that truly reflects Voldemort's sinister nature, as the Emerald Potion embodies his personality perfectly. The potion sits in a mount in a cave Voldemort visited as a boy, and is also known as the Drink of Despair, and it is called that for a reason. The potion, when drank, would cause immense abdominal pain from the moment the first cup is consumed. As it makes its way through the body, it causes an overwhelming and overbearing hallucination of the person's biggest, most deepest regrets. It also shows the person's biggest fears and makes things appear so real that it consumes them completely. The visions and pain only get worse as the drinker consumes cup after cup, forcing them to relive the mental anguish over and over again, while also physically draining them and inflicting massive dehydration upon them. If the drinker somehow manages to get through consuming the entire potion, then they can barely move their limbs as they attempt to cast the Aquamento charm to fill the cup of water. Unfortunately, the cup is hollow to any liquid but the Emerald Potion itself, meaning the water just seeps through immediately, leaving the person unable to drink. Personally, I just cast the charm into my mouth, but plot holes and all that. Anyway, the person in question must make their way to the surrounding lake in order to finally quench their overbearing thirst, and when they do so, their first touch of the lake awakens the Inferi, who will then drag them to their doom before they become one of them themselves. Let's stay in the cave for a moment, as Voldemort's next piece of magic is the actual next step of his Horcrux defense mechanism. One of the Dark Lord's most impressive magical feats was the creation of the Inferi, which was something that many believed couldn't be done. Gellert Grindelwald's main goal was to use an army of Inferi to mount a challenge for dominance over the Wizarding world and the Muggle world. He wrongly believed the Resurrection Stone would do this for him after failing to create Inferi through his own magical skill. Voldemort, however, managed to achieve this, although it's not really explained how. That's something that Harry Potter leaves to the reader to try work out for themselves, basically to use our own imagination, which I can respect, but I'd also really love to know the thought process behind it. Anyway, the Inferi were corpses who were animated by magic to do rather simple tasks, which was, in the case of Voldemort, to attack and drag the trespassers to the bottom of the lake, where they would certainly drown. Inferi are not actually alive, which means they are impervious to pain. Many magical spells are ineffective on them, as the Inferi's movement is not through their own will. The two most effective spells to stop Inferi are the Pulso, which is a blast that knocks them back at force, and also Confringo or Incendio, fire spells that slow the Inferi down considerably. It doesn't matter what condition the body of the Inferi is in, they will just keep coming. Voldemort created hundreds of Inferi in order to one day use them to be part of his army, but he never actually did. They reside to this day at the bottom of the lake, even after the Dark Lord's demise. Next up, we have two pieces of magic combined into one story, and that is the Rudimentary Body and the Life-Sustaining Potion. As a direct result of being killed after the creation of his Horcruxes, Voldemort was now tied to the world of the living, even if his body was physically destroyed. He existed in a ghost-like, spirit-like entity, hollow and translucent, but still had somewhat of a physical presence. After many attempts to regain his body, like latching onto Quirinius Quirrell in an attempt to acquire the Philosopher's Stone, and even drain the life force of Ginny Weasley to then combine himself with the 16-year-old Tom Riddle, all failed, Voldemort had all but given up on ever returning to power. That was until Peter Pettigrew resurfaced, and with the assistance of Barty Crouch Jr., aided Voldemort in what could only be described as his most experimental piece of magic. He was going to create a new body. Now obviously he couldn't conjure a body out of thin air, so that means he had to acquire some sort of a weak host. And if you ask me, you just need to take a look at the size of the body to guess what kind of human shell it was. I won't go into detail on that because I think many of us can already guess where it came from, but in order to remain alive in this body, he drank a mixed concoction of Nagini's venom and unicorn blood, which had to be fed to him quite often by Wormtail. As long as he consumed this potion, he could survive long enough until he regained his true form. However, that piece of magic was another situation altogether, and it follows this one. So the next piece of magic we are going to discuss certainly does follow the previous one I've spoken about, and that is of course the rebirth ritual. This for me seems to be a result of Voldemort's own research over the years, as he must have surely explored ways to return to power should he ever be killed. I know he was overconfident and arrogant, but he definitely would have had a trick or two up his sleeve, like a backup plan, from so much time spent studying all aspects of immortality and rejuvenation. The birth ritual was very, very dark magic and definitely linked in with his creation of the rudimentary body. In order for it to be effective, Voldemort needed to have a true enemy in order to extract their blood. His father needed to be dead, or alive, it wouldn't have stopped him anyway, in order to use one of his bones, and then of course the sacrificial servants who would offer their own flesh as a sense of loyalty, as even though it's not greatly talked about, all powerful magic does require a sacrifice. After all of the potion's requirements were met, the Dark Lord would now rise again. This ritual was very old magic and something Voldemort modified in order to apply to himself. After his rebirth, it would also take Voldemort some time to regain his full power. He would still be vulnerable, which may explain why he didn't want to go down that road straight away. Anyway, this ritual restored the Dark Lord to power, and things took a huge downturn afterwards. So let's talk about a piece of magic that I think is actually really cool, and that is of course the Dark Mark tattoo. Lord Voldemort placed the Dark Mark brand on his followers' inner left arm, both as a sign of their loyalty to him and as a method of summoning them to him when he desired. This was done by pressing his finger to any Death Eater's mark or his wand, which in turn caused it to turn jet black and delivered a burning sensation to any other person with the Dark Mark. Feeling the burn, the Death Eaters then could operate to Voldemort's side, but they were not forcibly compelled to do so. It is also unknown whether all Death Eaters would always feel the burning, or if Voldemort could choose to signal a specific person or people. The deepness of the mark's colour was connected to Voldemort's physical health. When Voldemort suffered his first defeat, the marks on the Death Eaters faded, but as he began regaining his strength, the faded marks became clearer and burned slightly, a sign of Voldemort's impending return to his Death Eaters. Bearing this mark also allows the Death Eaters to bypass a cursed barrier. After Voldemort was defeated for the final time, the dark marks faded to a scar. They would no longer burn, but would remain nevertheless. There was no possible way of removing the dark mark. Next up, we are going to discuss Nagini's Protection Orb. Now, there are many protective enchantments wizards can use in order to ensure valuable assets come to no harm, but Nagini's Protection Orb seemed to be completely impenetrable. The orb's sole objective was to protect the snake, who was also Voldemort's final Horcrux, from Harry Potter, who was aiming to kill her to rob Voldemort of his immortality. Voldemort claimed to Nagini it was the only way, though he was equally worried about the soul fragment that resides within her as much as her own personal safety. Voldemort also had Severus Snape partially encased by the orb in order to allow Nagini to kill him for ownership of the Elder Wand, in which it trapped Snape's upper body with the Great Serpent. Snape's attempt to throw the barrier off himself proved fruitless as Nagini bit him on the neck, sealing the man's fate as Voldemort then levitated the orb off him and left the room with Nagini. Finally guys, we are going to look at Morsmordre. Just a short one here. Morsmordre was a dark spell used to project the dark mark into the sky. This was created by Voldemort firstly for people to become familiar with the dark mark itself, which will in turn instill fear upon all those who see it. The mark was also cast into the sky when a successful task, mostly murder, was carried out by the Death Eaters in Voldemort's name. There you have it everyone, that is every single piece of magic Voldemort ever created. If there's anything that I left out, please let me know in the comment section below, and make sure to look out for my next video. Thanks again.